Welcome to Pub Sports Radio's NFL Futures Show. And today we break down the AFC South. And we start with the Tennessee Titans. 2020 record 11-5. They have the 13th easiest schedule in the league based on opposition forecasted wins. To make the playoffs, they are minus 150. To miss the playoffs, plus 110. Their regular season win total is sitting at 9.5. It's a pick'em on either side at minus 115. To win the division, minus 120. Win the conference 12-1 and win the Super Bowl 25-1. We're in year 4 of Mike Vrabel's run as head coach. 2 new coordinators. Offensive coordinator Todd Downing using the West Coast offense. Defensive coordinator Shane Bowen using a 3-4 scheme. Key acquisitions, Julio Jones comes over. They have from the Falcons, Josh Reynolds from the Rams. Couple nice pieces there. Des Fitzpatrick drafted 4th round, 109th overall out of Louisville. Dylan Raduns, the offensive tackle, number 53 overall out of North Dakota State. And then Bud Dupree is their main defensive pickup from the Steelers. And he has to come back from a pretty devastating injury. They lose Corey Davis to the Jets, Jonnu Smith down to the Patriots, and Adam Humphries is now playing for Washington. 29-19 record for Mike Vrabel, and an AFC title game appearance, a playoff win over the Brady Belichick Patriots, and that was after just 3 years. 3 years. Helps to have Derrick Henry. What a monster. 100 yards rushing in 10 different games, multiple touchdowns in 6 different games, 2,027 rushing yards, a 3rd consecutive campaign of over 1,000 yards. And I know that he split carries in his first few years, but at 380 plus carries in back-to-back years combined, including playoffs, that's a lot for him. I wonder if the massive workload at some point will catch up to him. Last year's 3rd-round pick, Darrington Evans, triple threat runner, receiver, return man. We talked about who is gone. Let's talk about Julio Jones and how much help he will be to A.J. Brown, and then Josh Reynolds as a 3rd wideout. Anthony Firkser should see an increased role at tight end. That is the plan. So former tight ends coach Todd Downing, in-house promotion to offensive coordinator, replacing new Falcons head coach Arthur Smith. Taylor Lewin limited to 5 games due to an ACL injury last season after playing only 12 games due to a banned substance suspension in 2019. You have Roger Saffold III at left guard, Ben Jones at center, right guard Nate Davis. Nice-looking group there. Defensively, there are question marks. Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson, Kenny Vaccaro all depart in the offseason. They signed Janoris Jenkins, who at 33 is still rolling. They draft Caleb Farley in the 1st round out of VTech. And Bud Dupree is I know he's a monster, but he's still a question mark coming out off a torn ACL, and they've invested heavily in him. 2019, 19th overall pick, Jeffrey Simmons is a monster. He's joined by free agent signing Danico Autry, who had 20 sacks in 3 seasons with the Colts. Last year, this unit struggled. 24th in points allowed, just 19 sacks on the entire season. Amari Hooker excelled as a safety, the secondary led by safety Kevin Byard. If this defense can improve, we already know what the offense can do. What is the ceiling for these Tennessee Titans, and what are your hopes for them from a betting perspective, Babano?
Well, definitely it looks like a 2-team race in this division, Tennessee and Indianapolis. And the fact that Carson Wentz is not going to be as absent as we thought he might be early in the year for the Colts is going to help them. So with that in mind, when I heard the Wentz news, I locked in Tennessee to win the division. And I still feel relatively good about it because I still think I have more questions about the Colts than I do the Titans. I actually like what the Titans have done on the side of the football where clearly they needed to address some things, and that's defense. I mean, Janoris Jenkins is a nice addition. Bud Dupree is a great player, but you mentioned it, coming off that kind of an injury, you're never sure if you're going to get him playing at the level he did prior to an injury. That's significant. But I'm going to buy into the fact that I think I'm reading that he's really worked hard to get himself in a position where he can still play at a very high level even after an injury like that. So I'm reading good things about how the preparation he's put in to have himself ready to come back and still be that impact linebacker he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think that obviously helps. You mentioned Danico Autry. To get a little more pass rush has to improve, and hopefully he can help that. Janoris Jenkins, the secondary, they lose to Dory Jackson, but he was never on the field very often. He always had injuries, so I think it's an upgrade actually with Jenkins. So I like some of the things they've done on defense. On offense, a lot, obviously the skill position talent. Tannehill has established himself as a quarterback that's done very well here in Tennessee. He's got obviously Derrick Henry, one of the best running backs in the NFL. He's got a good receiving core led by A.J. Brown that you add Julio Jones to it now, and Josh Reynolds. Don't sleep on Josh Reynolds. That was a nice addition at the wide receiver position for this Tennessee Titans team. It's going to help. They lose, of course, Jonnu Smith, but Anthony Ferguson, I thought he was good last year. I thought he produced. He made good plays at the tight end spot. I think they'll be fine with him at that position. The weapons are still there. You've got the quarterback, you got the running back, you've got the receivers, you've got a good solid tight end in Ferguson. You've got the team, the offensive line's pretty good. You've got the team in place to put up points again, but you lose the play calling and the scheming of Arthur Smith, who's now in Atlanta, and Todd Downing, he's on the coaching staff, and from a continuity standpoint, that's good. But how's he going to do for play calling? What if it's 3rd and 8 and, you need a specific play? And Arthur Smith was able to dial up plays the last couple of years that in certain spots, down and distance, time of the game, all of that, he dialed up the right play. What about Downing now? Are you going to get that same kind of high level of intellect and creativity and just that offensive mind and power, to call the plays at the right time? Because I thought Smith did an outstanding job coordinating this offense. So this is where we're going to find out something about Tannehill. Was Tannehill put in a position because of great play calling and scheming from Smith to play well? Because if he's just a legitimately good quarterback now since he's been at Tennessee, then it shouldn't matter at all that Downing is now calling plays. He should be able to go out there and win games and play at a high level. However, if he was propped up by good game plan, by good scheme, by good offensive scheming and diagramming and good play calling, and that's what really influenced Tannehill to look good these last couple of years, then I worry about Tannehill a little bit more now with Arthur Smith departed. So that's the thing. I mean, we're going to find out how good Arthur Smith is, and obviously we're going to find that out in Atlanta with an older quarterback and a bad O-line down there, what he can do. But there's question marks. Tannehill is still one of those guys. He's shown you a lot the last 2 years in terms of good play. But some of that, with Arthur Smith there, can he do it now with a totally different offensive coordinator with some change on that offense? That remains to be seen. I still like this team a lot because they should be better on the defensive side of the football. How much better remains to be seen, but in a very weak division, the worst division top to bottom in the NFL, they're going to have a very good season just because of the division they're in. And I still rate them slightly above Indianapolis, which just has a few more question marks personally for me than Tennessee does. So I didn't bet the win total over. We'll see from an ATS standpoint how they perform. I think it could go either way. My only bet with Tennessee is just win the division. Lay a small price because I think they can do that.
Very tight at the top with the Colts and the Titans. Let's move on to the Colts. And the biggest part of this puzzle was this Carson Wentz foot injury. They expect him to be out 5 to 12 weeks. I mean, that's a big space of time there. And it looks like he'll be in that front end, but still Bet365 has taken them off the board at this point. To make the playoffs, to miss the playoffs, and regular season wins are off the board, but everything else is up. 2020 record 11-5. They have the 6th easiest schedule in the league based on opposition forecasted wins. To win the division, plus 140. To win the conference, plus 1,500. To win the Super Bowl, plus 3,000. Frank Reich in year 4, and he's got a new offensive coordinator in Marcus Brady. West Coast offense, defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. 4-3 scheme. Key acquisitions. Wentz, we already talked about. Eric Fisher, offensive tackle from the Chiefs. Kwity Paye, round 1, 21st overall, the defensive end. And we're going to talk quite a bit. Or I'm going to bring up Kwity Paye when I talk about their defense. Kylan Granson, tight end, 4th round, 127th overall out of SMU. They lose Phillip Rivers to retirement. Anthony Costanzo retired. Trey Burton is a tight end free agent, and Jacoby Brissett to the Dolphins. So Wentz went from MVP candidate in 2018 to 28.4% bad pass percentage, the highest in the NFL. A league low 29.5 completion percentage while under pressure. He led the league in sacks with 50, tied for the lead in interceptions with 15, third in fumbles with 10. He was panicking. Now he reunites with Frank Reich, who was his offensive coordinator at his highest highs with Philadelphia. And he comes to a much better football team. You have one of the top offensive lines that's going to help him from panicking. This unit last year allowed the league's third lowest pressure rate at 17%. Compare that to Philly's 27.8%. The question is at wide receiver. Do you still trust T.Y. Hilton to make huge plays? He certainly started off slow last year, and he came on in the second half. Michael Pittman, as a rookie, will need to step up. You have Nyheim Hines out of the backfield, who is electric, and Jonathan Taylor, after a slow start, after Marlon Mack ruptured his Achilles, Jonathan Taylor was spectacular, but he was very good in the second half of the year. And then you have Jack Doyle. So you have a better situation for Wentz to succeed. And Taylor, 729 yards on the ground and 9 touchdowns over his last 6 games, including the playoffs. He started a rolling. Marlon Mack is re-signed. It's just unclear if he'll be at full strength to start the season. And we talked about Nyheim Hines. Only 6 drops on 215 career targets, and we've seen the speed. It's electric. You got Jack Doyle, Mo Alley Cox, both capable of really big numbers from the tight end spot. It's tough losing Anthony Costanzo. So they signed Eric Fisher, former number 1 overall pick in 2013. And they also bring in Quentin Nelson, who looked at the time like it was going to be a very important pickup, but he has a foot injury and is not going to be available. Starting right tackle Braden Smith, 4-year, $72.4 million extension, $42 million guaranteed. You know he's a huge piece to the puzzle. Then defense, they lose 2 of their top 3 edge rushers. They don't sign Autry or Justin Houston, so there's 15.5 sacks gone. So here comes Kwity Paye and 11.5 sacks in 4 years in Michigan. We know he's fast, but their second-round pick, Dayo Odeyingbo, is now looking at a mid-season return from an Achilles injury. So there's questions there. Now, we know DeForest Buckner is a monster. Darius Leonard, 3rd consecutive All-Pro season, 416 tackles, 15 sacks, 9 forced fumbles, 7 interceptions in just 3 years. He's incredible. Now he's the highest paid inside linebacker in NFL history. 5-year, $98.5 million contract. Bobby Okereke expected to shift to the middle. Anthony Walker is being let go. Kenny Moore, one of the best nickel corners in the game. Julian Blackman looked good as a rookie and is expected to be a key piece here. But there are question marks. And I can't wait to hear your breakdown for this squad. Coming off a great year, 11-5. The 2020 Indianapolis Colts were very good. What will the 2021 Colts be like? Take it away, Babano.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for this team, there's a lot of different ways it can go with them. Carson Wentz being reunited with Frank Reich can't hurt, right? I mean, it was definitely a good marriage in Philadelphia for them. Had its greatest highs when Frank Reich was still with that coaching staff under Doug Peterson. And actually, he played well 2 years ago. In fact, they made the playoffs that year, Philadelphia, largely because of the play of Carson Wentz, because the defense was so bad that year, and they still got into the playoffs. However, last year, you mentioned it. I don't know what, but he was just brutal. He was bad. Yes, the O-line was not good. And yeah, they had one of the weakest receiving cores in the NFL. That played a part in it too. But he was just bad, Carson Wentz. And he's got to play a lot better here in Indy. That's going to be the biggest question now. Can he rebound from really the one really, truly horrible year he's had in the National Football League? And can he stay on the field? We already have this foot issues that he's dealing with, but he's back on the practice field. He's been practicing all week. They say he's cutting well on that injured foot. And there's a growing anticipation and growing increased likelihood that he might actually be good for week 1. Crazy as that is, that would have been crazy to say that just a few weeks ago. But all of a sudden, don't rule out him playing week 1. for the Colts, Carson Wentz. So keep an eye, obviously, on his status. That's very important. The O-line is still very good. I'd say one of the top 10, borderline top 5 O-line in the NFL still. The one issue is the left tackle spot, because Anthony Costanzo retired. And now you're going to bring in Eric Fisher from the Kansas City Chiefs, who may not play in week 1, may not be ready to go because he had the Achilles injury late last year with the Chiefs. And if he doesn't go, there's a huge drop-off at the left tackle spot, the blind spot for Carson Wentz. So that's the one concern area there with the O-line, but everything else there looks good. The receiving core is a question mark, to be honest with you. T.Y. Hilton didn't have a great year, down season for him. He never had any sort of rhythm with Phillip Rivers. Maybe he gets that with Carson Wentz now here in Indy. Michael Pittman's got potential. Paris Campbell's good, but he never stays healthy. Jack Doyle's still a good tight end. So there's weapons there, but combination of health, combination of Hilton being on the decline. Can they get the production they need at that position? It's a question. Jonathan Taylor looks fine at the running back spot with Nyheim Hines, a nice backup option at that position. On defense, DeForest Buckner was outstanding last year, no doubt. Pay and Odeyingbo certainly have upside. The 2 draft picks they made. You look at the secondary. Xavier Rhodes was the surprise last year. This is a guy that ended his tenure in Minnesota, not playing good football. And last year they bring him into Indy, and he played very well last year. And he rebounded from really a particularly bad last year or 2 in Minnesota. So that was good. I'd like to see them find another good, reliable cornerback on the opposite side, because to me, that's not Rocky Ya-Sin for Indy, and that's not any of the other options they currently have. So the other cornerback spot, they may not throw it on the road side of the field very often if you're the opposing offense, but they may test that other cornerback side of the field to see what they've got there. Malik Hooker, of course, is gone. So the safety spot, there's a little bit of a change over here. Kahari Willis, and then there's a lot of unknowns at the safety spot. The linebacking core, it looks pretty solid overall. Bobby Okereke, you mentioned him, should be good. And of course, Darius Leonard. When he's healthy and he's on the field at the linebacker spot, there's very few better than him in the NFL. So they should be fine there as far as I'm concerned. They've got a good kicking game when you look at Rodrigo Blankenship. I think he's going to be a good kicker. You look at the schedule for them. Yeah, they play in the weak AFC South, but they also play the NFC West, the toughest division in the NFL. That's not going to be easy, and that's why I'm gun shy on the win total, and it's also why I lean to Tennessee winning the division. I think it's close. If you want to take the better price with the Colts to win the division, especially knowing there's a possibility Carson Wentz plays in week 1, I don't hate that. But I just think right now I've just got a little bit more faith, a little bit more upside and ceiling right now for Tennessee at the moment than Indianapolis. But certainly the division is going to come down to them or the Titans. I just made a little bit of a stronger case for the Titans. And it's a wait and see for me from an ATS standpoint. In terms of whether this team's going to be a profitable one or not. I think we're going to find out a lot the first couple weeks.
Very exciting to hear these 2 teams facing off, and Wentz looking to be healthy right from the get-go. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Now we move on to the dregs of the society here. Jacksonville Jaguars, we will start out with 2020 record 1-15. They have the 8th easiest schedule in the league based on opposition forecasted wins. To make the playoffs plus 275, to miss the playoffs minus 370. Regular season win total at 6.5. That is juiced to the under at minus 130. To win the division plus 650. To win the conference plus 4,000. To win the Super Bowl plus 6,600, 66 to 1. You have 3 coaches in their first year at the helm. Urban Meyer, the head coach, coming to us from college. Offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell. Defensive coordinator Joe Cullen. Key acquisition Trevor Lawrence. It's going to be very exciting to see the number 1 overall pick in business. And sadly, he doesn't have Travis Etienne by his side. He's going to miss the entire season with a foot injury suffered in that 23-21 exhibition loss to the Saints. That hurts. But they do have some depth there, but that hurts. And from a fan perspective, it sucks. Marvin Jones from the Lions comes in. He's going to help. He's going to look good with Shark. Chris Manhertz, tight end, comes in from the Panthers. He's more of a blocker. Shaquille Griffin comes in from the Seahawks. He's going to help. Rayshawn Jenkins comes in from the Chargers, safety. So cornerback and Griffin, safety, and Jenkins. They lose Chris Conley, the wide receiver, to the Texans. They lose Keelan Cole to the Jets. Urban Meyer comes out of retirement and will try his hand at the NFL after 17 years as a head coach in the college ranks. And I think there's going to be a steep learning curve. I don't buy it. And I'm ready to fade this team early and often, depending on the number. Trevor Lawrence under center, 36 games, 3 seasons at Clemson after taking over as a true freshman. 34-2 record, while completing 66.6% of his passes, 10,098 yards, 90 touchdowns, 17 picks, rushed for 943 yards and 18 scores as well. So Meyer has never experienced a losing season, 2 national championships. Lawrence has never lost a regular season game. These guys better start getting used to losing. Shark and Marvin Jones are a nice duo. Chanot, team high 58 receptions last year. I mean, he's very talented. 2020 second rounder, brings a lot to the table. The Jaguars are very weak at tight end. They drafted Luke Farrell in round 5, and they signed Manhurts, who's more of a blocker. James Robinson is going to have to be a monster this year with Etienne out, and thank God they signed Carlos Hyde for $2 million. Carlos Hyde wanted to be back with his former coach at Ohio State in Urban Meyer. They made a mistake in free agency by not helping out this offensive line. Stanford offensive tackle Walker Little in the second round. This guy's played 1 game since 2018. Offensive line, the interior of the offensive line is in much better shape. You have Brandon Linder, the center, AJ Cann, and Andrew Norwell. But the offensive line, they should have done more to help the offensive line. Defensive coordinator Joe Cullen spent the past 5 seasons as the Ravens defensive line coach. 18 sacks the Jags have. So obviously they spent the offseason making a big push to fix the defensive front. They signed former Bears defensive lineman Roy Robertson Harris, former Ravens defensive end Jihad Ward. They acquired defensive tackle Malcolm Brown in a trade with the Saints for just a 7th round pick. I mean, 1st round pick defensive tackle Taven Bryan's been a giant disappointment. Kayvon Chason, the 1st round pick from 2020, has potential to be big, and he's going to need to. And now Cullen's got the 3-4 scheme, so Josh Allen going to be used heavy as an outside linebacker. We know Miles Jack is the straw that stirs the drink, and he's coming off an excellent year. They bring in Shaquille Griffin. That's going to help. Opposite Griffin, C.J. Henderson, 1st-round pick last season. He spent the whole offseason returning from a labrum surgery, so we don't know how strong he's going to be early. They draft Tyson Campbell with the 1st pick in the 2nd round, and he's going to challenge Henderson for that starting job. Free safety depth, they bring in Andrew Sisko, 3rd-round pick 2021, and they sign strong safety Rayshawn Jenkins. I see a huge learning curve for this team to learn how to win, and I'm ready to fade. But Bono, Jacksonville Jaguars, take it away.
Yeah, it's. I actually initially thought I left the door open for Jacksonville to be better than maybe some people thought. Maybe they still might be, but boy, I have not seen much excitement about getting pumped up to watch this team and see them thrive based on the preseason. Again, you take everything with a grain of salt, but this offensive line looks like the tackle positions look just hideous at the moment. I mean, Trevor Lawrence didn't have time in any of the first 2 games. The tackle spots were just beaten by the opposing defensive line and pass rushers just too easily. That's a problem area. Their pass protection is a significant concern. They got their asses whipped in each of the first 2 preseason games. That starting offensive line for Jacksonville. That is an area of massive concern for me. You look at it, Trevor Lawrence, he's going to need a lot more protection than, say, he would need at the college level, because you need more time to be able to get to your 2nd and 3rd reads. A lot of times in the NFL, the defenses take away your first option, not so much in college, more so in the NFL. So I like the receiving core. There's some good pieces there like Chark, and Shenault has had a very nice preseason so far. James Robinson had an outstanding year last year, 1,000-yard rusher last year for this team. That's why, the Travis Etienne injury is disappointing. It's unfortunate. But this is the one position where they could afford an injury, the running back spot, because they have James Robinson. They bring in Carlos Hyde. So they're still relatively fine there in terms of depth. But, man, the O-line's got major concerns. And I worry about that, because without the O-line intact, they're going to have trouble moving the football and putting up points in bunches. And the offense has struggled, that starting offense in the preseason so far. On defense, they've really been bad in the preseason so far as well. I mean, despite the changes they've made, I like the addition of Shaq Griffin from Seattle, in that secondary. C.J. Henderson should be better in his second year, cornerback out of Florida. Tyson Campbell as well. I mean, there's some pieces in that secondary. Rayshon Jenkins, bring him in after a pretty good year with the Chargers last year. And they drafted Andre Sisco, who's a very, very good safety, high level of IQ in his Syracuse days. I really like that draft pick for Jackson. So the pass defense could actually be solid. What will they get from the front seven, the linebacking core? Miles Jack, great year last year, but really an up-and-down NFL career before that. Hopefully 2020 is a sign of what you'll get from Miles Jack again this year. The secondary, the defensive line, pass rush was an issue last year. Too many quarterbacks had time to throw the football against this Jacksonville team. Let's hope Josh Allen, the first-round pick 2 years ago, who was very good in his first year but missed half of last year with a knee injury, that he stays healthy and he brings that pass rush element. You got to hope Clavon Chason, improves in his second year and helps out Allen in terms of getting the pressure from that defensive front. The interior of the defensive line, Hamilton and Bryan, are very young and don't have a lot of proven production as of yet. And there is some concerns about the lack of depth once you get beyond those guys along that defensive front. So it's going to be a key to stay healthy, because this is one of those teams where if you start suffering cluster injuries on the defensive line, you're not going to have a defensive line that's any good, because they just don't have the depth there at this point in time. So it's going to be vital for Jacksonville to keep these guys healthy. But to me, more questions than answers. The saving grace is the division is the weakest one in the NFL. It could prevent them from having to have so many games where it just goes off the rails for them. From a game total standpoint, it's tough because the offense looks rough. It makes you want to bet their games under, but the defense looks equally rough as well right now from what I've seen. So it makes you want to think, well, they're going to give up points. So to me, I would put them in the bet against category. Certainly early on, I think there's going to be some growing pains. I think September is going to be the best month to bet against Jacksonville, because I could see them come November, December, figuring some things out, a little more experience, a little more continuity, and then November, December, they're more competitive and their lines are inflated and they start covering. But I think in September, it's going to be tough for them to have a winning point spread mark. I lean under the total of 6.5 with their win total. I haven't bet it, but I lean under, and obviously futures are out of the question for me. But definitely, I think September, ATS-wise, I think that's the time you want to jump in if you want to fade Jacksonville.
Well, I don't just lean under -130. I'm going to bet it. So I'm going to move on this under 6.5 at -130. I think I do not think that's expensive. I will be shocked if they can go 7 and 10. Absolutely gobsmacked.
And the NFC West is on their schedule. Keep that in mind. And you know what I think of that division? Best in football.
So I'm going to move. I'm going to move on this under 6.5 wins as soon as possible. Let's move on to your final team in the AFC South, the Houston Texans. And what a train wreck they were last year, and what a horrifying offseason. 2020 record 4-12. They are third hardest schedule in the league based on opposition forecasted wins. To make the playoffs +600, to miss the playoffs -1,000. Regular season wins at 4.5, juiced to the under at -150. To win the division, 28-1, conference 66-1, and to win the Super Bowl, 125-1. Nick Caserio comes in, and I like it. 20 seasons with the Patriots, 18 in player personnel. He doesn't get the credit because nobody but Belichick gets credit over there. But I think he is the right guy to fix what's going on here. David Culley, new head coach. That was a surprise. They have year 3 of Tim Kelly as the offensive coordinator. He was the only one who stuck around or was allowed to stick around. Defensive coordinator Lovie Smith coming in with a 3-4 scheme first year as a defensive coordinator. Key acquisitions, Philip Lindsay comes in. The jury's still clearly out on Philip Lindsay. Comes in from the Broncos. Mark Ingram joins him. So, from a 3-headed monster type of idea, David Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram is not a bad spot to be. They have Tyrod Taylor as a backup, and who knows with Deshaun Watson at this point. They also draft Davis Mills, so they have a plan for what they're going to do in the future. Round 3, number 67 out of Stanford, and Anthony Miller comes in, the wide receiver from the Bears. They lose J.J. Watt to the Cardinals, Will Fuller to the Dolphins, and Randall Cobb to the Packers. And we have to start with Deshaun Watson. I mean, it's just nuts to me. I mean, he had it all. He had it all. And there were so many different avenues for Deshaun Watson to bust a nut. So many different possibilities. So easy for him to bust a nut in a non-criminal situation. A very unpopular trade for involving DeAndre Hopkins was when it all started spiraling out of control. An 0-4 start. O'Brien gets fired. The team leaders bounce. They clean house. But Caserio, I think, is the right man for the job. He brings in 37 veterans through trades and free agency, 36 on 1 or 2 year contracts. So you're going to have a lot of competition for jobs. And maybe this team is quite a bit better than we expect them to be, because we know what happens when stars are dealing with horrible off-field situations. A lot of the times they focus solely what's happening on the field, or Evander Kane on the ice, or they focus solely on the sport to kind of get them through their troubles off the field. And that could happen here. Deshaun Watson coming off an incredible 2020, and Will Fuller gone is going to hurt. Brandon Cooks becomes the number one option. I mean, he finished with 119 targets. It was a lot easier once Fuller was suspended. They draft Nico Collins, 89th overall, out of Michigan, 6'4", 250-pounder, going to get looks right away. Kiki Kute is going to get looks, and he revived his career last year. Anthony Miller from the Bears, remember, second-round pick in the 2018 draft. He still has a high upside. He hasn't been able to follow up a good rookie season, but it's expected that he's capable of it. Their ground game was abysmal last year. 10 rushing touchdowns. That was third last. Ground yard, 91.6 average yards. That was second last as well per game. Jordan Akins as a tight end is going to help. I already talked about what I think of David Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram. It's not a bad three-headed monster. The line is set at tackle with Laramie Tunsil on the left and Titus Howard on the right. Justin Britt is expected to be the starter at center. We didn't see him play at all last year. He was rehabbing a knee injury. Lovie Smith has his work cut out for him, but I think he relishes this challenge. And their run defense was the worst in the NFL last season. I mean, they forced 9 turnovers in 2020. That's the second fewest in the NFL since 1980. Caserio adds 19 veterans on defense. I love just the 1 or 2 year contracts, creating enormous competition. 13 of the veterans he brings in on defense are for the front 7. I mean, the only one who we know is going to be there is Zach Cunningham, last year's leading tackler. Shaq Lawson, Jordan Jenkins, DeMarcus Walker all signed to come in. 6 new linebackers. Christian Kirksey, Kevin Pierre-Louis are going to find roles. Bradley Roby will miss the first game to complete the 6-game suspension for violating league's substance abuse policy, but he's a good cornerback. And Vernon Hargraves, slot corner. Secondary has 3 safeties. Justin Reed, 3-year starter. Eric Murray, Lonnie Johnson. Is it possible that this team is worth taking a shot at over 4.5 wins at a plus line? Is it possible that they're going to be better than everybody expects them to be? But Bono, Houston Texans, take it away.
Yeah, not with my money, but at the same time, it's 4.5, and I just don't like going under that low of a total. It's just all it takes is just some injuries to some other teams in the division, or a quarterback out, or Wentz goes down, or Tannehill goes down, and then all of a sudden here's Houston, maybe a chance to steal games in the division. But their schedule is very tough. The situation off the field, not only with Watson, but just the vibe around the team is it's tough to get behind that right now. And I honestly don't love the head coaching hire in Cully. This is just a cheap hire. Didn't have to pay a lot to get him in here. And it's almost like, hey, you're a stopgap. Let's see what you can do in a couple of years if we're bad. And then when we get good again, maybe we'll go in another high price direction. coaching wise. So I think that's kind of what they've done to this guy, and he's in a tough spot. There's no question. But the problem is the win total is 4.5. It's already the betting markets are well ahead of the curve here when it comes to thinking Houston's going to have a very rough year. When you look at it, I'd be shocked if Watson's taken a snap. Whether he gets traded or not remains to be seen, but we haven't seen it yet. And they're saying he's not going to end up playing a single down for the Houston Texans this year, which means it would be Tyrod Taylor at the quarterback, but who's serviceable. But now, remember, when he played well with Buffalo for a season there with the Bills, they made the playoffs one year. He's a little bit younger than he is now. He had a good little situation around him and a very, very good defense on his side as well with that Bills team that year. He doesn't have that here for Houston. This defense could be better, but this was an all-time horrendous defense last year. And to me, this is a defense that there's parts to like. Shaq Lawson, bringing him in, Desmond King, the defensive front. Again, J.J. Watt, yeah, you don't have him anymore. And yeah, you could say he was injured all the time, but the leadership as well that he brought to Houston, you don't have that anymore. Who's going to stand up in the locker room if things go off the rails? I don't know who that's going to be for Houston. I don't know if they're going to make significant inroads on defense, to be honest with you. The secondary was just absolutely hideous last year. Everybody was just throwing the ball and creating big plays in the passing game week in and week out against this Texans defense. And when you're looking at a division where Lawrence and time could get good, and you've got to deal with, if Wentz stays healthy, there's a guy that can burn you a little bit. And certainly Tannehill and the Titans can do that and have done that to Houston. Certainly last year, that's a big problem. I don't like trusting teams that just cannot cover down the field with the secondary and cannot generate a consistent pass rush up front with the defensive line either. And I think that's the situation you've got right now with the Houston Texans. The one thing that you're saving grace, though, for Houston, and why I know you're thinking over, Jimmy, I didn't think Jacksonville. I thought there was some hope for Jacksonville this year to be better than I thought, and I'm worrying more and more about Jacksonville the more I see them in the preseason. And if they're really bad, that's going to open up the potential for Houston to. And look, they played Jacksonville right off the hop, and I was leaning Jacksonville all summer, all spring in that game. But the more I see Jacksonville and they're laying points on the road in that game, it's telling me stay away, just stay off that game completely, and I'm going to. But that first game is going to be interesting, because if Houston's going to make anything of their season, I'm starting to think they have to win that game against Jacksonville in week 1, because I do think the Jaguars are a little bit ripe for the picking there. And if they win that game, it's going to go a long way to going over the 4.5. But I think there's a lot of games on their schedule that simply aren't winnable the rest of the way. And there's only a couple, 3, 4 at the most that I would consider coin flips for Houston, games that they could win. So for me, 4.5 seems right around where they'll end up being. I think they end up being a 4 or 5 win team. It's just a question, are you on the right side or you're the wrong side of that final win total? 6-10 ATS last year. Last year was a great year to bet against this team. I think this year, it depends on the point spread. Have the betting markets caught up to where Houston is? And the win total kind of indicates that. So if this team's even slightly better than we think, maybe they could cover some numbers. But this is right now a team I want to bet against until proven otherwise. And more than anything with Houston, I'm going to sit back, wait, watch the first couple games, see how the team plays. Don't expect Watson to be on the field. Does that bring them together and make them play stronger, more as a team on the field? All of that we'll see in the first couple weeks. But this is a team I'd like to wait, see them in action first before jumping in and getting involved with them.
And the Deshaun Watson news, we're waiting with bated breath. I mean, it's going to, at any moment, we will know what's going on. Been practicing on a side field away from the team. It's certainly moving in the direction of, it feels like it's moving in the direction now of him not playing. But it's still up for grabs. And that under 4.5 is heavily juiced to -150. You get a +120 if you want to go over the 4.5. There is your AFC South breakdown. Can't wait for football season this year, and Pub Sports doing it in a big way. Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. live show. Can't wait for that opening line show, breaking down each and every single game. And then Sunday morning, 2 hours before kickoff, we will have an NFL Pub Hub with revolving guests all year long. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for your support. Hit the like and the subscribe button. Leave a comment as to what you think, who you expect to succeed in this division. But most importantly, on behalf of Babano, myself, and everybody at Pub Sports Radio, thank you so much for your support. And let's have ourselves a giant football season.